Hi, welcome back to another session of PSLE Science Q&A with James. Now, we're going to work on the 2020 PSLE paper. Now, let's get started. Now, we will be doing this slightly differently this time. I'll be using my students' answers and using them as a form for us to reflect upon how they answered it, whether they answered it well, how can the answers be improved. All right? Now, let's take a look at the first question, question 29. The diagram shows a human body system. So clearly you can see that there is a heart, and of course there are various, all these lines will represent the blood vessels, and of course blood is traveling inside, carrying with it all kinds of things such as oxygen, water, digested food, and carbon dioxide. Now, what is this system? So there are two parts of the question, and then what is the function of this system? Now let's take a look at some of the answers. Now this will be a good answer. This is a circulatory system. So this is the first 1 mark. Remember, there are two parts of the question, 1 mark for each part. And what is the function of this system? It is to transport substances, all right, to and from all parts of the body. It's meant to transport. That's why it is part of the circulatory system, which you can also call the transport system. Now, some students prefer to give something in more detail. You can, for example, this student wrote this answer. Circulatory system, fine. For the second part, this child wrote in greater detail. The system transports oxygen, digested food, water to all parts of the body, and it also transports waste materials out of the body. Now, this is very important. If you're going to go into specifics, then you cannot leave out the major things that they are carrying. All right? As major as in things that you have already learned in school. This is part of your respiratory system. This is part of your digestive system. All right? Things that are being transported. So, and waste material is also part of your respiratory system. One of the things will be your carbon dioxide. So, if you're going to give in detail, then and you miss out some of these things that are transported, you will not get the mark for this question. Right? This is what I mean. Let's compare these two answers. It carries digested food, very good. Water, very good. Oxygen, very good, to all parts of the body. But what about the waste materials? So this part is missing. So this child will not get the 1 mark for the second part because it will be deemed as incomplete. So just take note of this. So if you want to give in details, you give all of it. If not, then you give the general purpose, which is to transport substances to and from all parts of the body. Now the second question is simpler, which is what is this part? Why? Right? Now if you have identified it correctly as this circulatory system, then you would know that this is the heart. This is necessary for pumping blood throughout the body. So, of course, the heart and the other parts of the system will be the blood vessels and the blood. Now, give this general term. If you're going to give things like veins, arteries, well, they're all subsumed under blood vessels. So just give blood vessels as your answer together with blood, half mark each. Let's take a look at part A one more time, just to look at some errors. For example, this child made the error of not mentioning all the things being transported. Mentioned oxygen, digested food, mentioned carbon dioxide, waste, but did not mention water, which is essential to life processes. Now, a more major problem will be this. All right, it talks about transporting blood. Now, blood is the medium that all these materials like oxygen, digested food, water, carbon dioxide is traveling in. Right? Blood is helping to transport things. So the system is not meant to transport blood. As a road is meant to for vehicles to travel upon. A road does not move road, if you get what I mean. Okay, that's a very strange analogy, but this is not right. Now let's move on to the next question. Now this is an interesting one. Part A is very straightforward. Now you can see this parachute-like structure. Right, this is meant to catch wind so that it can float in the air, stay in the air for a longer period of time, right? And then that wind blows it far, far away from the parent plant. So dispersed by wind. Here you see seed pod. When you see seed pod, automatically you think about splitting or explosive action. So this is a very straightforward 1 mark that's given to you. The difficult part is in part B. Now they want you to state the advantage of the method used by F to disperse the seeds. Now, very often in school, you'll get questions like, what is the purpose of seed dispersal? Now, that's not the answer here. Right, so you're comparing these two. Now this one requires wind. Okay, how about those with hooks? Well, requires, like those with hooks, requires animals. How about those with fibrous husks? Requires water. This one does not require wind, does not require water, does not require animals. It can disperse the seeds on its own easily. I mean, it cannot disperse it that far away, but it can disperse it around the parent plant. So it does not depend on any of this to disperse its seeds. So that will be the advantage of this method of dispersal. And this will be a common error for this question, where students misinterpreted this, or they automatically think about, oh, advantage of seed dispersal, and they didn't fully understand the question before answering it. So it's not about the advantage of seed dispersal, it's about the advantage of this method of dispersal compared to other methods of dispersal. So this answer is a wrong answer because it's an answer to a different question. Okay? Now you go to part C. Now John conducted an experiment to find out the aim, all right, to find out if the amount of wind will affect the distance moved by this seed E. And this child is very good. She wrote down some information such as this is a change variable, the amount of wind is a change variable, and the distance traveled will be the measured variable. All right, this is what you'll be measuring, this is what you will change, or you call this is what you will be, this will be the effect, and this will be the cause. It's a cause and there's the effect. Now John repeated the experiment 5 times with all the factors kept the same except for one. And this one, of course, will be the change variable, will be the amount of wind is the one that he changed. So that's the first thing you must take note. Now, what is this change variable? So suggest 2 possible ways of varying this factor. And this factor will be this, and that will be the amount of wind. So how can you change the amount of wind? Now, usually, we do not change the materials. So we do not add or remove. That's the best way of improving your experiment. All right, at least as far as PSLE questions are concerned. Therefore, things such as adding more fans and all that, try not to do it. So what can you do? As you know, fans, you can vary the speed. So you can change the speed of the wind from the fan. Very good. Then that you can change the strength of the wind coming out. Or you can move the fan nearer or further away from the seed. Then that also will change the strength or the amount of wind. That will change the amount of wind blowing at this. These 2 answers are perfect. What is not so good will be vary the number of fans, because by doing so, you are adding apparatus here. Alright, now of course the question didn't say here you cannot add apparatus, but as a rule of thumb, don't do it unless the question specifically gives you permission to do it, otherwise don't do it. Now, things such as this, conduct the experiment at a windy place with the fan to make there be more wind. The problem with this is, imagine yourself, you must try to always imagine yourself doing the experiment. If you cannot control the wind in nature, which you cannot control the wind in nature, then how are you going to record your results on the table? Right, if you're using a fan and you're varying it, you can talk about, oh, the strength of the speed, I turn it on to number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. But right now, if you're doing in nature, in a windy place, sometimes the wind blows, sometimes it doesn't blow, then that will mess up your cause. And then that will make your effect very hard to relate back to your cause. So don't, of course, use this kind of variables as well that you cannot control. Because if you cannot control the variable, then how can you decide how you vary it? Because it's out of your control. This is an interesting alternative. Now, for the first one is used by many students, very good, right? Increase the wind speed or decrease the wind speed. The second one here, turning the fan away to change the amount of wind exposure. Now, of course, I show you a diagram here, right? If you want this seed to travel and you measure how far it travels, if you're going to talk about changing the direction of the fan, you can only do 1 or 2 things. First one, let the fan blow at this seed. Second thing, turn the fan away so it doesn't blow at this. You can have 2 settings, like 2 choices. But I'm supposed to repeat it 5 times with all the factors kept the same except for one. And you're supposed to vary this. But if there's only two ways of varying it, have wind and no wind, then this method does not allow you to do it 5 different times with 5 different speeds. Okay, so this idea, although it's interesting, it cannot work because of this condition. I hope everyone is still okay and still following along with me so far. Now really, the purpose of going through the different answers is to take a look at how you or your peers might answer this and look at the possible answers given and why are they acceptable, why are they not. And through that we learn from our friends. Let's take a look at more answers coming up. Now we look at question 31. The diagram shows how substances are transported. It's a big clue to tell you this is your transport system or your plant transport system. So they can be water carrying tubes, food carrying tubes, and all that. Now P and Q represents different parts of the plant. Now the arrows represent the movement of substances G and H. Now identify P and Q. So we get a clue from where they start from. I'll start from the roots. So what is absorbed out through the roots? Definitely that must be water. And water goes through this part should be the stem, very good. And that from the stem, right, if you look at this, roots go up to the stem. From the stem you can go to leaves. Okay, look at my beautiful drawing. It goes to flowers. Alright, goes to flowers, go to leaves. That's how I get your answer to the first part. Second one. Now, this part here, very important. I will always say this. Alright, I will always say this, which is words have meaning. Words have meaning. Notice this word is in the plural form. It says substances. It is not written like this. Substance, bracket S, which gives you an option whether there's one substance or multiple substances. Here, the person who designed this question has been very kind by telling you straight up that there is more than one substance being transported. Alright, there's more than one substance represented by H. So this child got it right by saying that H represents water and mineral salts. Now this is what you learned in primary 3, right? Roots absorb, see, H is being transported out, right? Roots absorb water and mineral salts. So that's the first part. 2 marks, right? Identify them. That's the first part. Got it? 1 mark. Second part, describe. Describing question, you got to answer it in a step-by-step fashion. Describe how these substances move in the plant. So how do they move? Roots. Okay, talk about very careful. Absorbed by the roots. Okay, not transported but absorbed by the roots. Then transported up the stem by water carrying tubes. Okay, plural. To the leaves and the flowers. So these 2 parts together will give you in the next 1 mark. So 1 mark for absorbing up via the roots and half mark for this and half mark for the transporting up via the water carrying tubes to the rest of the plant. By the way, water carrying tubes are found in all parts of the plant, including the roots, stem, flowers, leaves, fruits, all parts. That's why water can get to every single part of the plant. Likewise for food carrying tube, just to clarify that in case you think this is only found in the stem, which is not true. Okay? Therefore, an answer like this means that this person did not understand the significance of this plural noun, which is more than one. So, just mentioned, H is represented by water. Very common error. This, of course, is still correct. Half a mark here. Right? It's just worth half a mark, not worth the full 1 mark. And this is absorbed by the roots, correct? Half mark here. Transported to the stem. But how is it transported? There's only one part. What kind of cells would transport it? The water carrying tubes are special cells, right? So you've got to mention the water carrying tubes because it wasn't mentioned. She shall still get 1 mark for her efforts. Alright, talk about the substance, water, and absorbed by the roots. But unfortunately, the rest of it, she cannot get her 1 mark. As mentioned, same kind of mistake. Substance H is water, which is correct, but that's not enough. That's why I put a caret for you to do your corrections. Right, adding the part about mineral salts. And since it comes from the roots, plants take in water through their roots. Okay, fine. This part is true, but after this, what happened after this? Now take a look at PSLE. They may not give you half mark like what I give you in school. I give you half mark is to credit you, to acknowledge the parts that you got it right. By PSLE, it may be 1 mark or 0. So please try to give as complete an answer as possible. And this child, when she's answering the describe question, she skipped one part. Now she got the H correct, very good, right? Water and mineral salts. But however, you talk about the getting through all parts of the plant, this child went straight to the water carrying tubes in the stem, to the flowers and the leaves, and skipped the part about roots absorbing the water and the mineral salts in the first place. So this part was missing. So she got half a mark for this part, 1 mark for this part, but missing that half a mark. And I'm sure she knows it, all right? So don't waste that half a mark. So before we move on to the next question, let's look at one more. Now, do always spend a few more seconds just to fully understand the question. Don't rush into answering. Like, because I have taught my students about this phrase, more haste, less speed, right? Really important phrase. Now, what does more haste, less speed means? Now, this child definitely knew her science, right? She went straight. She got full marks for her answers. The only problem is she gave answers that were not requested for. The question just asked for what is H, did not ask for what is G. Asked to describe how these substances H move through the plant, did not ask for how substances G move through the plant. So of course she got her full marks for describing what is H and how the H moves through the plant, but she also spent time to think about and write down so neatly about what is G and how G was transported through the food carrying tubes, how they were made in the leaves. Understand about the more haste, less speed? Alright, definitely she was very in a hurry to give her best answer for this. Alright, but as a result, she spent more time on this question, time that she could have spent elsewhere or spent checking. So girls, remember, just spend a few more seconds to fully understand the question by looking at the words or the picture. Okay, that's me nagging again. Alright, let's go back to the next question. But we cannot leave before looking at wrong concept. Now, words matter. Not just our words matter, the words in the question, your words matter too. If you are going to say that roots transport this water, you see, roots absorb water and transport it to the rest of the plant. You are telling me that the roots will transport water to the leaves, root will transport water to the fruits, to the flowers. Come on, right? That's a wrong concept. And you will be penalized for wrong concept. You will not get your marks right. So that's why I mentioned, let me belabor the point, spend a few more seconds to read through your question. And of course, you must spend some time to check through your work. Definitely. Okay? Little nagging out of the way, let's go to question 32. Now, this is about a mosquito question. Now, notice here, this part is the breeding tube, all right, of the mosquito larva. And there's a part that will be poked through the surface of the water to take in air, all right, of course, taking the oxygen and to be used for its life processes like respiration. The problem here right now is when we put a layer of oil on top, that oil will block this breathing tube. So air cannot enter it. And this poor fella here, sorry, not poor fella, okay, I don't like mosquitoes, they are pests. They will then die. So how does it okay, that's the first part. And the second part is this word called breeding. Now, breeding is important. Okay, everyone. So this question is not simply about how does spraying oil on water kills the mosquito larva. It's about how spraying oil on the water prevents it from breeding. So if you talk about breeding, this is actually your life cycle, right? From your eggs to your larva to your pupa, then to your mosquito, and then of course lay eggs again. Okay, so if the larva can be killed, if I look at banana, can be killed at this point, then of course the life cycle cannot continue. So that idea has to be quite clear here. So when I initially marked the work here, I think I was a bit too lenient. So let's take a look at what I mean. Larva breathes through breathing tubes, good. Oil blocks the breathing. I'm going to bracket the part where I give marks. Oil blocks the breathing tube, preventing mosquito larvae from taking in oxygen, very good. Thus, it will die due to lack of oxygen, very good. So this part here, it should get the marks. Second part, so how does it prevent it from breathing? Preventing it from breathing. Now, at first, actually, I gave this. Actually, I ought to have been stricter. The child should have mentioned that because it dies, the life cycle cannot continue. Larva cannot continue to become pupa and adult and to lay eggs. That's why it cannot breed. To breed, it must be able to lay eggs. But if it cannot reach the adult stage, it cannot lay eggs to breed. It cannot mate, cannot lay eggs to breed. And that idea wasn't very clear through this answer, which I accepted in the first few copies that I marked. Therefore, for the second half of the answer, I'll actually suggest writing in things either if the larva dies, it cannot continue its life cycle, or if the larva dies, it cannot reach the adult stage to lay eggs. Then that will address the breeding part of the question. The first part is it will suffocate and die. Second half will be if it dies, it cannot reach the adult stage to lay eggs, or if it dies, it cannot continue its life cycle. Then that will address both parts of this question. Now, let's take a look at the next part. Now, let's take a look at this answer. Now, this answer doesn't talk about two things clearly. First one, yeah, I know air cannot pass through the oil, good. But it jumps straight away to larva will not have enough oxygen. There is a disconnect here. How did this oxygen get to the larva? So remember the previous student mentioned about the idea of having breathing tubes, making reference back to this clue in the question. So should have told the marker that the air or the oxygen cannot get to the larva breathing tube. Alright, cannot get to the larva, therefore the larva doesn't have enough oxygen and will die. For the second part, but the breathing was not addressed at all. So of course, 0 mark for this answer. And the other reason why that answer is not acceptable is because there is oxygen in water. There is dissolved oxygen. The only thing is the mosquito larva cannot use the dissolved oxygen because it uses atmospheric oxygen due to this breathing tube sticking out of the water. It doesn't have gills to take in dissolved oxygen. Therefore, by saying that it doesn't have enough oxygen is insufficient. You need to talk about how oxygen get into the mosquito larva in the first place. Knowing that, then you can say, oh, therefore it dies. Right, so this first part here, yeah, that's true, but I cannot jump straight to this because I cannot assume you know that this is hard, that I cannot assume you know that the larva taking oxygen through this breathing tube. And of course, the second part here doesn't talk about breathing. Okay, breathing and breathing wasn't mentioned clearly. Thing to take note of is the word how. How talks about you need to explain the method. Now this child wrote down oil prevents mosquito from breeding, but how? How? If you talk about my noisy pair of birds distracted me from my work, but how? How can two tiny birds this small distract me from my work? If you talk about they were chirping non-stop, like right now I'm sure you can hear them chirping in the background, that actually affects my recording. But I got to talk about the how. And if I don't talk about the how, then you will not be very clear. You must make assumptions and you may not assume correctly. Stop chirping. Okay, it doesn't obey my instructions. Just in case you are not aware, you should be doing your corrections. Right, that's why I'm showing you different students' work for you to see, because sometimes your answer do represent or do resemble those that I show you up here. So at least you know, you not only see the model answer, you also see answers that are similar to how you would have written it. And then, of course, making similar kind of errors. Then therefore, it's clearer to you as to how you're going to work on the corrections. Okay, let's move on to the second part of question 32. Now, malaria is a disease spread by mosquito. Children infected with the malaria are found to be bitten more often by mosquito A. Joel wanted to find out if children infected with the malaria are more attractive to mosquito A due to a certain smell that they produce. And who are these they? They refers to these children. So the mosquito are attracted not to the shirt that you see afterwards. It's attracted to the children, not to them also. It's attracted to the smell that these children produce. So he used the setup shown with 20 mosquito A's in box P, and he placed a white shirt worn by the child infected with malaria. Of course, to be a very safe experiment, they don't put a real child inside. Okay, that would be very unkind, very unethical. So they use a t-shirt instead, so no harm comes to anyone involved in this experiment. Now, Joel counted the number of times the mosquito landed on the shirt for 3 minutes. He repeated the experiment using another shirt worn by an uninfected child in box Q. So there was another box, alright, with of course 20 mosquitoes flying around, and there's another t-shirt inside, and this is box Q. And of course here, alright, this shirt is worn by an uninfected child, which therefore will not produce this smell produced by the children of malaria will be on the shirt. And since the child who wore this shirt doesn't have malaria, this shirt will not be smeared with the sweat or this have the smell on it. You know, sometimes smell can get onto clothes, like how you eat durians and then the durian smell lingers in your home, on your refrigerator, or eat some mala hot pot and then the smell of the food will get onto your clothes for a couple of hours. You just smell mushrooms and all that. So that's what I mean by the smell. The mosquito is attracted to the smell. So right now, make a hypothesis, not fair test, not aim, hypothesis. Now, if you remember your experiments, right, where does hypothesis come? Let's take a look at the order of things. Typically in your workbook, you will have an aim. Aim is basically a big word for question. What's the question that this person wants to ask? Who is the fastest girl in class? What's Mr. Long's favorite fruit? You guys who know me will know, okay? What's my favorite fruit? So the hypothesis is you're going to make some assumptions first. I think Mr. Long's favorite fruit is durians. Okay, so for example, this is like your assumption. So you're going to assume something first. Assume that I like something. You assume that is the answer. Then you carry an experiment to prove whether this is true or not true. If you talk about the question, who's the fastest girl in class? And the hypothesis, I think that maybe, I don't know, Charlene is the fastest girl in class, or Yue Xuan is the fastest girl in class, or Saki is the fastest girl in class, or Saisha is the fastest girl in class. I don't know. That is an assumption, a hypothesis. Just assume, okay, I think based on my observation, that's the case. But how can we prove it? That's why we do the experiment to prove it. Record down data, time the girls as they run a few times to make sure the results are consistent, are reliable. And then based on that, we draw a conclusion. Conclusion is the answer. A big word for answer. Answer to what? To the question. Who's the fastest girl? I think this is the fastest girl. And my results show that, yes, she is the fastest girl. Or my result shows that, no, she is not the fastest girl. That is the idea of assumption, right? It's always tagged to your aim as well. So let's go back to the question now that we are clear regarding what is a hypothesis. So remember, step 1 is the aim, the question. So here the aim is, Joel wanted to find out if children infected with malaria are more attractive to mosquito A due to a certain smell that they produce. So the hypothesis is an assumption. Okay, is it true? Well, let's assume that it's true. Mosquito A is more attracted to a shirt with the smell which children infected with malaria produce. Let's go back again. The aim is to find out whether, it's like a question, is it true that children infected with malaria are more attractive to mosquito A due to the kind of smell that they produce? Assumption, yes, mosquito A is more attracted to, let's talk about the shirt, okay? It's more attracted to the smell which children infected with malaria produce. So that is the hypothesis. Then we proceed to look at the information to find out if this hypothesis is really true. Then why is this answer lacking? If you compare these two answers, you will see that this answer is missing the reason for it, which is malaria. Go back to the question, to the aim. Children infected with malaria are more attractive to mosquito A due to the smell they produce. Here you talk about the smell attracts more mosquito A, but what is the cause, the reason for this smell? Alright, that is, this link to the aim is not complete, it's not very strong. Then this answer talks about the malaria, that children infected with malaria, alright, mosquito is attracted to the shirt. The problem is the mosquito is not attracted to the shirt. Is it attracted to the smell? The smell produced by the children who had malaria. Right, so wrong on two accounts. It's not attracted to the shirt, but attracted to the smell on the shirt, and the smell is produced by those with malaria. Now, you try. Can you tell what is missing in this answer? And if you talk about malaria being absent here, you are absolutely correct. Right? Malaria is absent here. And why must malaria be mentioned? We talk about that in the aim. Now we move on to the next part of the question. This is a very interesting and common sense question, right? Because all of us know what mosquitoes are. We know what their colors. Well, color is typically black. Aedes will have some white stripes on the legs, but they're basically black in color throughout. So now Joel used a white shirt instead of a black shirt for the experiment. Suggests why using a white shirt allows him to obtain more accurate result. Alright. Now, of course, common sense is if you wore a black shirt, yeah, of course, if the mosquito land on the black shirt, it's harder for him to spot it, right? So he must talk about the white shirt. So why did he use a white shirt? So that he can spot, first point, spot, so he can see the mosquito. Number two, can count the mosquito. There are two parts to this answer. You must be able to see them, and then you must be able to count them. These two parts must be present. Then you can have an accurate result, because result means you have some number that you record down. How many mosquitoes landed on the shirt? To count, you need a number, right? So if you answer, very often I notice children will write down things that is spotted, easier to see, but forget to mention about counting. Let's take a look at some of those answers now. Now, this is one of those examples. It will be easier to spot the mosquitoes on the white shirt than the black shirt. Correct. However, you're only talking about spotting. You haven't started counting. So the counting part is missing in this answer. And the other problem I noticed is there were several students who did not answer directly. You talk about why we don't use the black shirt. Very good. Mosquitoes will blend into the black shirt, making it harder for him to spot how many times the mosquito landed on the shirt and to record the result. But the question didn't ask you why he didn't use a black shirt. They asked you why he used a white shirt. So answer directly, right? I didn't see anything about a white shirt. The question asked for a white shirt. Now, of course, during actual exams, we will try very hard to see if this is the reverse of this. We'll try very hard to give you the mark if there's no other way of interpreting this. However, don't shoot yourself in the foot to begin with. Answer directly, so it saves yourself the hassle, it saves the markers the hassle, alright, of trying to think, because we always want to be fair to all the students in Singapore when we're marking this. Comparing this answer to somebody who has given answer directly and clearly, of course, the direct, clear answer will be the better answer. And the better answer deserves the full marks. Alright, and if it's very possible to give a better answer, then give it. So from this, I clearly can see this child understands the idea behind using a white shirt. So all I need to do now is to learn to answer directly. Okay? In the actual exam, I will actually try my very best to give you this. Because it will make sense. You know why they shouldn't use a black shirt. So just tell me you should use a white shirt because it's easier to spot, easier to count. Alright? Now this next part is a very interesting part. So now he has these numbers, right? These numbers here shows that there are more mosquitoes landing on the shirt in box P, fewer mosquitoes landing on the shirt in box Q. I repeat, there are more mosquitoes landing here and fewer landing here. The answer, the number here is not 420 and 0. Bear this in mind, okay? Because this will come back. I'll come back to this afterwards. There are still mosquitoes landing on the shirt without the smell produced by children infected with malaria, which is this shirt. Mosquitoes still go there, fewer, but still go there. Now, scientists are able to store the smell produced by the infected people in a container, suggest how Joel could use his smell and the results here to reduce the number of bites on people. So let's take a look at this answer up close, alright? Joel could place the container which stores the smell produced by the infected people in a part of the house that is not used by people. So imagine, alright, there is this place, the people are hanging around this part at the living room watching TV. So they place it at the backyard area where this is a container where people don't go there very often in a day, maybe only once a week to dry the clothes in the yard. And mosquitoes who are attracted will come here, likely to come over to this part and avoid going to this part. So that will reduce the number of mosquito bites on people. It will not eliminate, it will reduce. Okay, so we put it, in other words, the idea is put it far away from people. Alright, so they will go far away from people, they won't go towards the people. But of course, you cannot put it too far away. If I live in Juchet, or I live in Geylang, or I live in Yishun, or I live in Tuas, I live in Singapore, right? But if I put this container in Malaysia or in Thailand, it's not going to help me. Because mosquito, I'm going to make sure the mosquitoes who are near to me in my area don't come to me. So I need to put it not too far away from me, alright? Maybe a few rooms away. So if they were to come into my house, they will not come into my room, they'll go elsewhere in my house and hang around there. Get the idea? Alright, no point putting this container in my neighboring flat, alright, 10 blocks away. That won't help me. Get this idea right, okay? So if the idea is to place the container in a place far away from people, so the mosquito will come over, don't go to me, but go over to the container, then how should I use it? So Charles said, use the container to attract mosquito to eat instead of people. Good. But how do I use it? Where do I place it? Right, you got to talk about the how. You got to be clear. It's like washing detergent. Don't just say, use it to wash clothes. Okay, but how? Do I pour it in the machine? Do I shake it? What do I do? So the how wasn't clear in this answer. I'll always put the correct answer here for you to map the answers against. He could reduce the number of bites on people by removing the smell. The thing is, the smell is not on the normal people because usually people are not affected by malaria, right? So this is to use this, knowing this characteristic of mosquitoes, A, that will be attracted to this smell produced by children with malaria. Use this smell to draw them away, to attract them elsewhere. So this idea doesn't work. We cannot remove the smell from me because I don't have the smell because I was not infected by malaria. And most people aren't infected by malaria. So this idea cannot work. Similarly, right, this child mentioned use the smell to attract more mosquitoes to the container instead of people, reducing the number of bites. The idea is correct, but where should he be placed? Where must it be placed, right? So the how part wasn't clear, where should be placed. Okay, now we go on to question 33. Describe how bees help plants to reproduce. Again, the how and describe. Describe means step by step. How means you got to be super clear on how it happens. So bee lands on flower, transfer the pollen grains from the anther. So a few key terms here. Pollen grains from the anther, the male part that produces the pollen grains, to the stigma, pollinating the flower. That, alright, is enough for 1 mark. Alright, so I bracketed the part to get the 1 mark. Some of you were confused and you thought that it is dispersing. Now, dispersal is meant for seed dispersal, not pollen grain dispersal. When you use the wrong words have meaning. When you use the wrong words, then of course the answer will be wrong. And since words have meaning, you have to be very clear. If you talk about bees land on one plant, the pollen will get stuck on it. Pollen from where? Enter wasn't stated. And will be transferred to another plant. Not clear again. Which part of another plant? Is it a petal, stigma, leaf? So when you describe, you've got to be very clear and very step by step. Right? Talk about the details inside, and which is lacking in this answer. Now let's examine the second part here, which is now this person Jia Xuan investigated the use of substance N on bees with two containers R and S. Right, these two containers of the same size using a circular cage. Now, you know maths, right? So you know that if it's a circle, if from the middle, all the radius will be same distance away from each other. Now, the entrance is here, which means the bees can choose to travel to this container with sugar water only, or travel here to the container with sugar water and substance N. That means that the bee has an equal chance of going to either side. You're not purposely placing this very near to the entrance, then that will skew your result. That will affect the result. That will be an unfair thing that to do. So to be fair, place them at equal distance away from the entrance. So how is this arrangement? How does this arrangement of the containers allowing for a fair test? The containers are arranged from equal distance away from the place the bees enter the circular cage. First, observe that, right? That's the first part. They are equal distance away. So what if they're equal distance away? So the only change variable, so this first part talk about arrangement. Equal distance away. The second part of the answer talks about fair test, which is therefore you know the only change variable should only be the absence and presence of substance N. That's the two part of the answer. First part talk about the arrangement. The two containers are at equal distance away from the entrance where the bee comes in from. Second part of the answer, why is it a fair test? Because there's only one change variable, which is the absence or presence of substance N. So this child wrote it quite well. The containers are placed at equal distance from where the bees enter. So there's the first half mark, ensuring that the only change variable is the presence of substance N, ensuring a fair test. I'll prefer to actually the phrasing presence or absence of substance N, but this is fine. Okay, second half mark. You can use this for your corrections. In case you have forgotten to do your corrections, please work on it. And this answer shows you what happens when you're missing part of it. So this answer talk about the arrangement of the containers, equal distance away from the opening. Very good. Got half a mark. But overlook the part about fair test. So how do you check your work? You check what is required and see if your answer talk about the things in the question. Yeah, my answer talk about the arrangement, but answer did not talk about fair test. So I got to talk about fair test, which is absent here. So that's how you can check your work. Go on to the next part. The number of times B visited both containers on day 1, day 5, day 10 are shown here. Now, describe how substance N affected the number of times B visited both containers from day 1 to day 10. So the absence of, so what happened here, you must take note. Here, day 1, actually there are equal number of bees visiting them. Day 2, by day 5, the bees kind of realize, hey, the one in substance N tastes nicer, so more come over here. But there were still bees going over here. By day 10, even more, they realize the liquid produced, prepared in this container is more delicious, contains substance N. This one, no substance N. But some of them still go to the container R, but most of them go to container S. So therefore, the absence means don't have, right, of substance N in container R, cause the number of times V visited it to decrease from day 1 to day 10. Okay? This talks about this graph. And the other half is 2 marks, right? You've got to talk about 2 marks, right? The presence of substance N in container S caused the number of times B visited it to increase from day 1 to 10. That's this one, showing this. So that's how you get your 2 marks for this. Another child answer in this way. On day 1, the number of times bees visited the containers was the same. By day 5 and 10, the number of times B visiting container S was more, indicating N attracted more bees. This is also a good way, a different way, but a good way of answering this. Now, a lot of you mentioned about this. Answer: substance N increased the number of bees visiting S as N attracted bees to it. And you could be wondering why you only get 1 mark, right? Because remember on day 1, when there was already substance N inside this container, yet the number of bees going to them is the same on day 1. So this statement seems to suggest that from day 1 there's already a difference, which is not true. So your answer got to make sure you have that distinction, just like how this child wrote it, right? Day 1 is the same number, but by day 5 and 10, now the numbers visiting S is more than the one visiting R. Now, this is the last question we'll cover for this video. This is also a life science question, the last life science question for this paper. And then the next video will be all on the physical science questions from the 2020 paper. Okay, so hanging there, and let's finish this properly. Jaden placed the same amount of pond water, which contained tiny organisms, into 2 identical glass containers A and B. He painted container B black. So here contains pond water with tiny organisms in clear container, pond water with tiny organisms in black container. Now, when we read such things, right, we've got to make some assumptions. There's no indication the pond water are from different ponds, right? So it's a fair assumption that they all come from the same pond. It's also a fair assumption that the organisms are the same kind of tiny organisms, the same kind. So, same pond water, and same kind of tiny organism. That's only fair because all the wordings here suggest that they are the same. Can you imagine if we give this kind of wordings and then we say, oh, this may not be the same as this? That is very hard to understand the question because it opens it up to too many weird possibilities. Right? And if we try to control by saying these are the same organism, these are the same pond, and then the question becomes too wordy. Therefore, girls, you've got to know how the questions are being phrased such that they are clear and yet they're not overly wordy. Now, then, clear lead tells you it's transparent, black tells you it's opaque, light cannot pass through. That's typically how the science questions are meant to mean. He placed both containers at the same place under bright light, so both of them receive light. Under bright light, then he measured the amount of oxygen in each container daily. So measure oxygen increasing. Therefore, there must be photosynthesis happening. Alright? If light affects the amount of oxygen, therefore this must be some kind of tiny plant organism like plankton or something like that, or some kind of algae that can capture light in the presence of chlorophyll, carbon dioxide, and water to give you oxygen and food. This one shows the usage of the oxygen decreasing, right? So they're containing this here probably means these same organisms did not get to receive light, which is very clear. We saw that light cannot enter this. Therefore, they are unable to photosynthesize. They can only use the oxygen inside. Now, one point to be very clear, the organisms here are doing 2 things. They will use oxygen because they are living things. They will use it for their respiration. They will also give out oxygen in the process of photosynthesis. Both things happen together. Okay, not one or the other. Just to be very clear on this. Now, let's try to understand how to answer the question now. Explain why the amount of oxygen in container A increased while the amount of oxygen in B decreased. Well, I just explained it, right? So A is clear, so let light enter it. So the organism could trap light and release oxygen during photosynthesis. Very good, 1 mark. Causing the amount of oxygen to increase. Now B is black, thus doesn't allow any light to pass through. And then the tiny organism cannot trap any light for photosynthesis. Instead, the tiny organisms just take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide, causing the amount of oxygen to decrease. Very lengthy, but very detailed, Very clear and very correct. Now, next one. So just one possible reason that could have resulted in Jaden's obtaining inaccurate results. So if you talk about this, right, you took the pond water from the pond. So it's possible that the organisms are not uniformly distributed throughout the pond. It's not like at every part of pond water you have the exact same number of organisms. Maybe one part there could be more organisms, some part there could be less. Therefore, the number of organisms may be different. So that's the best answer I've seen regarding this question. This is another way of answering this. The organisms in A receive light to photosynthesize and produce oxygen. This will explain why this increased. The amount of oxygen increased. In B, the organism did not receive light to photosynthesize and produce oxygen. Instead, they were taking in oxygen. So the amount of oxygen here decreased. Alright, so very good. And why? Again, there are different number of organisms in each container. Excellent. As promised, please take a break. I'll see you in the next video to discuss the remaining questions from question 35 onwards for physical science. Take care, have a good rest, goodbye.